dark forest. The evening fog obscured the boundaries of the forest. No matter how hard Alan tried to stop the car and reach his destination, the fog seemed to swallow the path, becoming the only visible reality. Throughout the journey, he felt a strange pull towards the place he had to go, Echo Forest. The town he arrived at was veiled in an invisible dark shroud. Every resident he encountered silently turned away and quickly passed by, as if afraid to look at him too long. Alan had long studied the secrets of the forest. He learned that people had been disappearing here for hundreds of years, and behind their fates were not just natural disasters or failures, but something far more terrifying, supernatural. The locals believed the place was cursed, but to him, it was just another mystery. That's why he came, ready to immerse himself in this dark abyss. He wasn't afraid of what others might call death or bad omens. He was curious about what lay behind this darkness, and he was determined to find out. As he neared the forest, Alan felt something unusual overwhelm him. A chill pierced every cell of his body, and the feeling that each step brought him closer to something unpredictable kept him restless. The footsteps echoing off the gnarled roots and ground seemed to intensify the silence around him, turning it into a dense, motionless weight. Maybe I really am walking towards my demise, he thought, but he continued forward. The fog thickened, but now Alan couldn't stop. He had to find the answers. He had to uncover the mystery of this forest. He had to understand why all those who had tried to unravel its secrets had disappeared. He walked on, feeling more and more that the forest was changing around him. Every movement felt heavy, and the ground beneath his feet absorbed every sound. It became colder. So cold that it felt as though even his thoughts were freezing. Alan stopped, feeling his heart tighten from the silence. Had he heard that? Was it the whisper of the trees? It seemed like they were calling to each other, and something invisible was watching him. Nothing was visible, but his body could feel that something or someone was drawing closer. Suddenly, before him, among the underbrush, a dark figure flashed. It moved so quickly that Alan barely caught sight of it. A faint thought crept into his mind. Was this real, or was his imagination succumbing to panic? He quickly scanned the area, but saw nothing. The darkness thickened around him. The forest seemed to absorb the last rays of light, and the shadows grew, turning into something bigger than ordinary. Alan felt that he was no longer in the world he knew. A few minutes later, the dark figure appeared before him again, and this time, it was clearly visible. A person? But its features were blurred, the face hazy and almost shapeless. And there it stood, right in front of him. His heart began to race. "Who are you?" Alan forced himself to ask, but the voice he wanted to hear didn't come. He wasn't even sure if he had actually spoken the words. The dark figure did not respond. It just stood there, and then slowly began to move backward, vanishing into the fog. Alan took a few steps forward, trying again to figure out if this was a hallucination. But then he heard a faint, but distinct sound, something rustling in the forest, as if someone was scratching the ground, slowly and carefully. He raised his head and saw other figures emerging from the fog, large, dark shapes with eyes that ominously glowed in the darkness. All of them moved very slowly, but surely, with a single purpose, to approach him. Alan understood, this was not just a place, it was a living entity. The forest was one massive, stretched consciousness that had existed for a long time, maybe forever. And now, he had become a part of this entity, which consumed everything in its path. His heart raced even faster, but he couldn't leave. He couldn't escape, for the forest had already embraced him. The echoes began to hum in his ears, whispering and pulling him along. And this was only the beginning. The darkness grew even thicker, and Alan felt the world around him transforming into something undefined, ominous. The forest was alive, and with every step, it consumed him more, like a vast cosmic organism inhaling its victim. Something irresistible pulled him deeper into this ruthless place, and he couldn't resist. Alan stood still, barely breathing, trying to imagine what to do next. Before him stood one of the dark figures, while many others moved slowly out of the fog, like living ghosts emerging from the depths of the forest. He couldn't tell who these beings were. Were they just echoes of his own fears, or real entities that had long lost their human traits? "What do you want?" he asked, trying to gather his courage, though his voice barely reached through the chaos around him. The dark figure before him did not answer. Instead, it took a step forward. Alan felt a coldness seep into his skin, down to his very bones. His heart beat wildly, and his hands grew wet with sweat. "I'm not afraid," he whispered to himself. His mind was beginning to calm, though he felt that what he was facing couldn't be understood with ordinary measures. This was from another world. And then, amidst these invisible forces, one of the figures began to grow clearer. Its outlines seemed to cut through the very darkness, and Alan saw that this was not just a figure, but something that had once been human. His heart froze when he saw its face, disfigured, emotionless, but with eyes that seemed bottomless, filled with a horrifying shadow. "Who are you?" Alan asked again, though he felt that this question would not be answered. The being before him did not respond. But its movements grew more distinct. It raised a hand, and a faint light ignited in its palm, as dead as the forest surrounding them. "You don't need to ask," the figure barely whispered, though its voice sounded like an echo passing from one dark part of the forest to another. "What do you want?" Alan's voice came out stronger than he felt. He tried to keep himself together, but fear crept back into his heart. "You came, like the others, seeking answers, but now you are a part of this place," the figure said, and Alan felt its words penetrate deeper than just sound. It was as if something else, something otherworldly, was transmitting its essence to him. "Why won't you leave me?" Alan whispered desperately. He didn't have the strength to fight these beings. They weren't alive, but they weren't entirely dead either. They were something in between, something that existed between the world of humans and those dark forces that existed at the very edge. The being shook its head, and lightning-like shadows ran across its eyes. It moved slowly, approaching him, and each step it took left behind an emptiness that swallowed any light. "You can't go back," it said. "Now you are with us, part of this forest. And you, like us, will remain here, forever." Alan felt the ground beneath him soften, as the thick darkness penetrated his heart. He couldn't say what it was, but his body no longer obeyed him. His legs couldn't move. And suddenly, amidst the darkness, he heard another voice. It was a human voice, but not like the others. It wasn't filled with fear, it wasn't laced with shadow. It was quiet, but pure, drawing his attention. "You're not alone, Alan," it whispered softly in his ear. Alan turned his head sharply. Amidst the thick fog, he saw another figure, a person, but not like the others. It wasn't very clear, but its face was calm and relaxed. "Who are you?" Alan asked, trying to discern the new figure in the dark. "I am one of those who tried to escape, but this forest, it always takes those who come here," the voice replied. The figure moved closer to Alan, and he could see it more clearly. It was another person, but her face was tired and terribly pale. There was a mark on her arm, old, scratched, and bleeding. It seemed to have left a trace even on the skin of this person. "What happened to you?" Alan asked. "This forest changes everything that enters it. It leaves you a part of itself, and you cannot escape," the stranger said. "But there is one way, you have to leave everything you know behind and connect with what is here. Otherwise, you'll stay here forever." Alan felt his mind begin to spiral, his consciousness clouding. All the words from this figure became elusive, like the forest itself. "Stay here forever," Alan whispered, trying to understand what that meant. "Here is the translation of the text into English. The choice is yours," said the figure. "But remember, the forest does not forgive weakness." Alan felt something unbearable tighten in his chest, and he stepped back a few paces, clenching his fists. The forest around him did not merely exist, it lived, breathed, observed. The darkness was not just an absence of light, it was a force that hid thousands of secrets, thousands of living fears, and each step he took, each decision, brought him closer to an answer that, perhaps, it would have been better not to find. The figure before him was still alive, but no longer entirely human. Her eyes, though not devoid of the imprint of the human soul, seemed empty, as if absorbed by the forest itself. They gazed at Alan with a deep calm that brought no comfort, only more anxiety. "You are already a part of this place," the voice spoke again, one that did not belong to a human. It sounded like an ancient echo, a reverberation left by those who once came here and could never leave. Alan glanced at the forest that stretched before him, almost feeling as if every tree, every bush, every shadow leaned towards him, like winds in the night sky, beckoning, calling him. "I won't give up," he whispered, though he understood perfectly well that the fight would no longer stop what had already happened. He had become a part of this place, and now only one road remained, to go forward or plunge into this abyss forever. "You can't go back," the same figure spoke again. She took another step forward, and now Alan felt her presence fill everything around him. This was not just a physical figure. She was part of the forest itself, its dark soul, now united with it. Alan took a deep breath. "What if I find a way out?" "You're too late," the figure replied, and her face, though lacking distinct features, grew darker, as if all memories of human life were beginning to fade. "What do you mean?" Alan asked, trying to hold on to the last threads of his sanity. The figure gave a slight smile, not a grin, but a shift of her face into a form that unmistakably filled him with horror. "The forest does not let go. You have already become a part of it. Your body will remain here, and your soul will wander in the fog until it finds its home among these trees." Alan felt as though the earth beneath him had crumbled away. But why? What is this place? This place was not always like this. Once, it was a forest full of life. But humans disturbed its peace. They tried to breach the secrets that belong only to the world of the dead. And for that, it took them. And now, everyone who enters here becomes part of it. Alan couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I won't believe this is true." "You don't understand yet," the figure said in the same indifferent voice. "And you won't understand until you become part of it. But you're already here. And your soul has already begun to change." Alan understood that with every passing second, the forest was consuming him more and more. But one question gnawed at him: why was this forest so powerful? Why was it alive? All these thoughts were interrupted by a voice that rang out from the depths of the fog. "You are not alone, Alan." Alan slowly turned, trying to recognize where the voice came from. It was a man's voice, but it sounded as though it echoed off the walls of an ancient temple. Was this another entity of the forest? Or someone else who had ended up in this hellish place? "Who's there?" Alan shouted, feeling his heart race again. He was ready to fight, even if it meant it would be his last battle. From the fog, a figure gradually emerged, clearer than the others. It was a man. Tall, dressed in dark, worn clothing, with pale eyes that had no depth. His gaze was neither penetrating nor frightening. Instead, it was sad and lost. Alan could sense that this man had been here for a long time. I've been here for many years," the man said, looking at Alan as though familiar with his pain. "Who are you?" Alan asked, surprised. "I'm one of those who came here earlier, but I couldn't find a way out." "You're not alone in this forest. There are many like me. And I tried to find a way out. But I was wrong." Alan took a few steps toward him, his hands scraped from thorns, his clothes soaked in earth, as if he were already part of the forest. He felt that he couldn't stop. It was as though the forest itself was pulling him, turning him into another shadow. "What happened to you?"
Alan asked, trying to discern the pain and disappointment in the man's eyes. "You'll find the answers if you stay here long enough," the man replied, slowly clenching his fingers. "But remember one thing, every one of us here dies and is reborn in another form. The forest consumes our souls, and we become part of it. Just like you." Alan felt his body begin to lose sensation. The word echo was ringing in his head more and more often, and the forest had completely consumed him. "What should I do?" he whispered in a half-dream. "You choose your own fate," the man said. "But remember, you can't defeat what happened long ago." Alan stood in the dark void of the forest, which had become his new world. Every step, every sensation was now under the control of this place. The forest gave him no sense of time, nor space. Everything was as if frozen, like in an endless nightmare. His mind tried to piece together why he hadn't lost his sanity yet, but with each passing moment, it became harder. The man who had appeared from the fog stood nearby. His gaze never left Alan. It was the gaze of someone who had long submitted to his fate and now watched others as potential accomplices. "You can try to escape, but only for a while. The forest will take you, whether you want it or not," the man said, his voice soft but filled with concern. "It doesn't let go." Alan looked at the forest again. The shadows of the tree trunks stretched toward him like hands, ready to entwine him, consume him, and he would remain consumed forever. He felt this everywhere. The forest lived, and he could no longer exist beyond its boundaries.
"How did you survive this?" Alan asked, trying to understand something about what had happened. "How did you accept all of this?" The man didn't answer immediately. He was silent for a long time, as if gathering his strength. "I didn't accept. I just stayed. Like everyone here. But if you want to try to escape, I'll tell you something others won't. The forest won't allow it. It will play with you. And even if you escape, it will take your soul. That's its price. And all of us here have already paid." Alan fell silent. What the man said didn't bring comfort. It only made him wonder whether there was truly a choice. He felt that what he was experiencing was not just a nightmare. It was something more. And the forest probably already knew his weaknesses. Alan looked at the forest once more. It was alive, and every step he took seemed like an echo of what had already happened. Could he really escape? Or was it just an illusion of freedom? "You say there's no choice here. But maybe there are other possibilities?" he said, trying to find some hope. The man slowly shook his head. "There is none. You can't find a way until you understand that this forest is not just a place. It's more than just physical existence. It's a trap, and now you're part of it, not only of the forest, but also its history." "You didn't answer my question," Alan said. He didn't want to give up. He couldn't accept the idea that everything was already lost. "There's only one way," the man said, turning to him. His voice had grown colder. "But you're probably not ready. You'll have to choose what you want more, to survive and become part of this world, or give your soul to break free of it. Alan took a deep breath. I'm ready. I want to understand. The man looked at him, and for a moment, it seemed like he hesitated before quietly speaking. You must go to the very heart of the forest, where its heart is kept. There, you will find what you seek. And remember, those who went there never came back. Because the forest always takes part of their souls. Alan didn't respond. He felt how every word he spoke became emptier, as if everything he had done until now led to this moment. He had to go deeper into the forest. That was the only way. He began moving forward, slowly, cautiously. The forest around him looked increasingly threatening. Every tree seemed to be watching him, every shadow hid danger. The feeling that he was trapped in a snare never left him. The man remained behind, and Alan could only hear the echo of his own steps. The forest began to change. The trees grew taller, and the air became heavier. Dark resins appeared underfoot, intertwining with the roots, looking like living creatures. Every step felt like a heavy endeavor, as though the earth itself didn't want him to pass. And then Alan noticed something in the fog. It was not a figure. It was a shape. Dark, formless, but distinctly felt, like a presence watching him. Are you looking for answers? The voice echoed in his ears, though it didn't belong to any living being. Alan stopped, trying to understand what was happening. The fog around him thickened, and the shape began to move closer. It moved slowly, heavily, like some unclean force that had no physical form, but its presence was unbearable. I'm looking for a way home, Alan answered, though he was no longer sure if there was a way back. Home? To this forest? The figure laughed, its voice a mix of laughter and sighs. You're already home, Alan. Home with what and who we all are. The entity moved closer, and Alan felt his heart tremble with despair. What did this mean? All these dark trees, the forest that had consumed so many souls, seemed to know that he would be here. You're already part of this place, and your soul belongs to it, it said again. Alan stood, watching this strange formation. Now he understood, there was no escape. And did he even have a choice? The fog around him thickened, and Alan felt it filling every cell of his body, filling his soul with a heavy sensation. The forest seemed to push him deeper into its depths, where every step was a challenge to his consciousness. All the fears he once had now seemed insignificant compared to this darkness, this abyss that consumed all life. And there, in this endless darkness, the figure spoke again. Do you still hope for salvation? The voice sounded as if from within, not from without. It touched Alan's consciousness, squeezing it like an icy vice. You have nothing to search for anymore, you've already lost part of yourself. Alan didn't answer. There was only an empty space inside him, as if he no longer belonged to himself. He felt his heart pounding heavily, and his body desperately trying to break free from what enveloped him, but he didn't know where to go. The figure raised its indistinct, foggy hand and extended it towards him. Its contours blurred in the air like shadows moving according to their own logic. The forest began to part around them, the trees seeming to retreat to open a new path, but it was a path that led to an even greater abyss. You can still understand, the figure said. Its voice was like a whisper from the deepest parts of the forest. This is no accident. You were chosen. Chosen to become part of this place, just like all who come here. And it doesn't matter how you fight. This place will take you, and your only choice will be whether you can accept it. I won't accept it, Alan said, but his voice sounded less and less certain. He wanted to be strong, to fight, but these words, these images, these dark shapes of the forest, they were infiltrating his mind. It doesn't matter how many times you say it. You can't go back, Alan. The forest has taken you. You are now one of us. Alan shuddered. His hands dropped to his sides, although he tried with all his might to keep them ready. His eyes, though not seeing everything around him, felt every movement in the darkness. But it wasn't just ordinary fear. It was something more, an overwhelming sense that he was on the verge of losing himself. Why? He asked, though he wasn't sure what answer he wanted to hear. Why was all of this happening? What had he done to end up here? You haven't done anything. It's just part of what is, the figure replied. The forest doesn't choose. It just waits. Alan was on the edge. He felt his body slowly, but stubbornly, moving forward, as if his will had been captured by this place. He no longer had control over his movements. The forest made him walk, and he walked. Whether it was the will of the forest or simply helplessness, Alan couldn't say, but he understood. He had to walk this path, at least to understand why this was happening. I won't give up, he repeated in his heart, trying to find the last remnants of his strength. But the forest didn't respond. It only watched as he made his way through its dark corridors, as he became more and more part of it. By the time the last ray of light disappeared behind the horizon, Alan realized he had reached the depths of the forest, where all sounds had vanished. There was no wind, no rustling of leaves, only absolute silence. Just endless darkness that enveloped him on all sides. And then he saw it. In the middle of the forest was a large stone circle, made up of massive. Get ready for the scariest experience. Subscribe YouTube channel, bell thumbs up like thank you.